So they took children as young as 3, and they found that they understand the concept of what is real and what isn't. And that's very basic. It's not that they demonstrated no confusion. It was that they did demonstrate that they understand the idea. When you ask them if something's real, they know what you're asking. Now, whether or not they can tell if a thing is real or not is a whole other issue.
Right.
Until they're about 7, kids can be easily misled by adults, persuasive words, or by evidence. And when they're saying evidence, they're talking about evidence that would seem to lead to a certain conclusion, but maybe that it's not quite what it seems.
The stockings are full and the toys are
Right, right. It sure looks like Santa came last night, and there's definitely evidence for that, but they're not thinking in terms of what else could be causing this. They hold on to their beliefs about some fantastical characters like Santa longer than others, such as monsters and dragons. So children will drop their belief in something like a dragon and understand that it's not real, while they're still believing that Santa Claus is real. Most of the kids in the study were Christians, and the numbers of those who believed in Santa would likely be smaller if there were children of other religious backgrounds in the same sample. And by this, I think they're just saying that most Christians celebrate Christmas, so it's more likely that those children would be exposed to Santa, as opposed to, you wouldn't test the Santa theory on, Muslim-raised children or, Jewish children. It certainly wouldn't be the same valid question.
In those cases, you could go with Mr. Hanky.
The Christmas Pooh. So it says, logically, from what kids observe, it makes sense to think that Santa is real. And this is according to Dr. Woolley. She's a psychologist and professor at the University of Texas. Santa and the trash collector share certain characteristics. Both are people whom kids have heard about but have likely never met before. There's proof for Santa's existence. The gifts that appear on Christmas morning, as well as the garbage man, he makes trash disappear, even though kids don't usually see them in action. A 5-year-old has the cognitive skills to put together the pieces of evidence, but because the pieces are misleading, he or she comes to the wrong conclusion. Younger children may not have the cognitive skills to put the pieces of evidence together, so may in fact be less likely to believe in Santa's existence. And that was what was interesting, is that the 3-year-olds were less likely to say Santa exists than the 5-year-olds. So it seems that the 3-year-olds are believing in something, but it's not really based on evidence. They're not evaluating the evidence. As they get older and they start to understand the evidence, they begin to believe more, even though the evidence is leading them to the wrong conclusion. So at 3 years old, whatever is your method of determining real from unreal is not evidence-based. And then at 5, you begin to weigh evidence a little bit more. Let's see. The 5-year-old has cognitive skills to put the pieces together, but because they may be misleading, they come to the wrong conclusion. And so, let's see, she says, what types of cues and contexts are most convincing to children? Her research team went into preschooler classrooms and told them about a new character that they called the Candy Witch. And this was a woman who comes on Halloween, after Halloween, and she changes out your candy for toys. And they got some of the parents to go along with this and tell the kids, the Candy Witch might come and take your candy and give you a toy instead. And then they switched out the candy for the toys in some of the homes. So all these kids got the story. Some of the kids actually got the switch. And let's see. Nearly 2/3 of the children were convinced that the Candy Witch was real. Those kids who were visited by the witch were more convinced of it. And like Santa Claus, older preschoolers who were on average 5 years old were more convinced than younger preschoolers who averaged 3.5 years old. These results were published in the Journal of Developmental Science in 2004. So from this we see that children are easily manipulated with evidence, and they can be reasonable, but they can still be wrong. So it's not unreasonable to believe something exists when it doesn't, but it can still be wrong if you're basing it on evidence that is not good evidence.
Right.
And that's why verification and not popularity is required to demonstrate the truth value of a claim. So that's another thing that we see a lot in our email, is people who are extremely intent on changing someone's mind, but not necessarily providing adequate evidence to justify that change of mind. So it sometimes seems more important for someone to, it's almost like if I can convince you to agree with me, then I'm right. And it's like, no, if I convince you to agree with me, then I just convinced you to agree with me, and if I'm wrong, we're both wrong now.
Right.
So verification is what demonstrates the truth value of your claim, not convincing other people. Simply convincing other people gets them to agree with you whether you're right or not. And if you're wrong, you're just convincing more people to believe something that's wrong.
Right.
Let's see. And then we talked about the 5-year-olds being more influenced by evidence. Currently, she and her students are examining another concept related to reality, when an event is impossible versus improbable. And this was kind of interesting. They gave the kids different scenarios, and the children took, I don't know if they put them in paper or how they did it, but the children had to separate these little things into this thing is impossible or this thing is improbable. And they gave the example of one of the 5-year-olds who was given the scenario, Sarah owned a peacock as a pet. And when she was asked whether the scenario was real or not, she said it's not real. And when she was asked to explain how she knew that it wasn't real, she said because nobody owns a peacock. So she took something that's improbable and she put it in the impossible category because she just simply was making an assumption that since no one owns a peacock for a pet, that's impossible to own a peacock for a pet. That was her 5-year-old logic. Another scenario was Julia jumped into the air and never came back down. And Mia also correctly identified this as impossible. And when she was asked to explain her reasoning behind why it's impossible to jump into the air and not come down, she said, because nobody wants to live in the clouds where they can't see the sky. So Mia, in one instance, she got it wrong for, I don't want to say it's a wrong reason. I think that there is a certain understanding of saying, I have never seen this, but she doesn't quite get that that doesn't make it impossible.
The same type of mistake in reasoning led to a correct answer in one case and an incorrect answer.
Right. In her other answer, at least though, to say that I've never seen this. I don't believe it because I've never seen it. But to say that it's impossible, that would be going a little bit too far. So, but then the other one, because no one wants to live in the clouds, it's just completely, out there. I mean,
although
it's bizarre.
some of our callers, I think, may want to live in the clouds.
But the point is, she doesn't say it's because gravity is stopping you from staying up. It's like no, because if you stayed up there, you would never get to see the sky.
I'm wondering if there's something about if there's something in this where you and I talked earlier about knowing something's wrong but not knowing why.
Yes.
In much the same way that, for example, if I did a particular magic trick and tried to sell her that I was psychic, she may not know exactly how it's done, but she knows there's a trick there, even if she never knew that I did tricks. And I'm wondering if this isn't akin to that. I know that people don't live in the clouds. I'm not sure why, so I'm going to make up a reason that makes sense from my point of view.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Because there's no actual evidence in there, other than I don't want to live in the clouds because I wouldn't be able to see the sky. So it's an entirely personal thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Let's see, her responses are typical for her age, says Dr. Woolley. Early results suggest that 5-year-olds don't yet have the ability to distinguish what is impossible from what is unlikely to happen but could technically happen. In future work, Dr. Woolley and her collaborators plan to investigate whether a researcher acknowledging that the situation is, whether a researcher acknowledging that the situation is strange alters the kid's view of whether the scenario is real. And they talk a little bit about imaginary friends, and they say that imaginary friends can be used to help children cope with stress. And I thought that was an interesting point, that feeling like you have someone there with you can help you feel better about a stressful situation. And they said this is a strength of children, their ability to pretend they can fix a problem with their imagination. And I know that a lot of people have contacted us to talk about their feelings of comfort, like, how comfortable they felt either believing in the past that there was someone there to look out for them or feeling like there is somebody there.
Right.
And I've heard people even say, I couldn't have gotten through this time without God.
Yeah.
I couldn't have done this without God. And it's just, it's sad that they did do it on their own, but they don't acknowledge their own power.